So welcome to another review, guys, and today we have a really exciting IEM. This is the NFAudio NA2 Plus single dynamic driver, around $150. So it falls right smack with your Starfields, Starsea, Spring 2. Really good IEMs in that price range, but how will this stack up? We're gonna find out in this review. Alright, so looking at the signatures, we're gonna compare this to several IEMs in that price range. So looking at the signature, here you have a very enthusiast signature. So it's actually fairly neutral from the base to the mids region. And at the top, you're getting that double horns at the top. So this is very similar to maybe the CVJ CS8 or the Lark in terms of the overall signature. You're getting that, flat base and then mids as well. So in the $100 price range, this is the first time that I have seen something like this. So looking at the measurements here, so from the base region, you're actually getting a small rise. I'm going to around 600 hertz regions. You're getting a slightly recessed sub bass here, and yeah, the recession is not that big as well, but yeah, it rises from the base region. I'm going to around 500 hertz, and then from 500 hertz, it goes down a bit to around 1K to 2K here. And actually in the 1.5K, you're getting a slight hump there, and after that you get a big rise to around 5K with your first peak on top, and then after that it goes down to around 7K. And then after that, it goes up to your 12K. So you have a 12K peak here. So looking at the signature, for me, this is a very enthusiast signature. So it's definitely bright signature on the ear here. Comparing it to other IEMs, so compared to the NFAudio Legacy 4, so as you guys can see, both of them have that double horns at the top. But your Legacy 2 is more toned down, actually a lot more toned down in the top end. And your Legacy 4 as well has more elevated, sub bass as well in the measurements. So your top end has, more toned down top. You're still getting that double horns at the top. You're still getting that 12K, elevation in the NFAudio Legacy 4, but not as, elevated as your NA2. So look at the Spring 2. So again, your Spring 2, the UBQ EYZ is smoother on top here. It's a slight U with the Spring 2, but very slight here with some treble elevation. But in the Spring 2, you're not getting any peaks there, as you guys can see. And yeah, the top again in the NA2 is more elevated there. So compared to the Starfields, so your Starfields will be more IEM diffused here. So you're not getting any peaks on the 5K region. Actually, you're still getting that 12K elevation in the Starfields, but not as much as your NA2. But actually, they do have some similarities because yeah, from the base region to the mids region, it's actually fairly neutral. But your Starfields will still have more warm neutral here. Right, so going to the sound, so again, even if the NA2 measures like that, so it's not bass light at all. Actually, the bass here is really prominent in the mix, and this is actually one of the deepest sub basses that I have heard. So the sub bass here is really prominent in the mix. The slam is really prominent, and yeah, might be the most prominent sub bass that I have heard in any IEM. So definitely that dynamic driver type of presentation really shines in the mix here. So this IEM heavily reminds me of the tightness of the MEAC, the Shanling ME80, but for me this is even tighter in the overall presentation. So this is one of the more tight dynamic driver presentations that I have listened to. So I would say really technically capable for a dynamic driver, one of the most technically capable dynamic drivers that I have tested for me. So given that signature of that double horns at the top, transients here are really pronounced in the mix. So the double horns on top really makes the presentation aggressive, musical as well, and quite revealing as well. So for guitar tracks, I really like this. The transients are more pronounced in the mix, and also quite speedy presentation as well for a dynamic driver here. So for percussions, it really shines in the mix. I would say the presentation here sometimes reminds me of the BQ EYZ Spring 2. So it has that shine to the overall, that shimmer to the overall presentation, which is not something that I see in a lot of dynamic driver IEMs. So first, let's go to the bass. So this is one of the deepest sub basses that I have heard in this price range. So it's tight, and the slam is really prominent in the mix. So maybe this reminds me of a planar type of slam. So the bass impact and weight is very present in the mix. So one of the most weighty basses that I have listened to, very prominent here in the mix. But I like the technicality of the bass overall. They were able to do this without being overwhelming in the mix. So for me, there's no mid bass bleed in this. They were able to make it big with that good weight without having some mid bass bleed. So it's not overwhelming in the mix. And I would say overall, it's just the right amount of bass for me here. It's not overly done. So it's quite substantial in the mix, but it's not bass light at all. It's just the right amount for me. This won't be for bass heads. So the bass here, is not that prominent in the mix. But the positioning for me is great, and also it's quite quick as well in the overall presentation. It has that tightness to the overall bass. Again, they were able to find good slam, but still with some tightness in the presentation. So I would say overall, this is the strength of the NA2 Plus, and this also gives the NA2 Plus a unique selling point in that price range. So this is the key spectrum for me of this IEM. So the mids are slightly recessed in the mix here, but not that much for me. So the male vocals are recessed. The female vocals are nearly where you want it to be. So it's better in the female vocals, but the male vocals are good. But the vocals for me, even if it's recessed in the mix, is still quite revealing, and also has nice texture as well. Has some air, but not overly done for me. So it's the the right amount of presentation again for me. So the presentation for me is quite revealing in the mix, and definitely not lacking in the vocal presentation overall. So just one issue for me here is that this might have some hotness in some tracks. So I did encounter it with maybe 1 out of 15 tracks, so not all the time, but there's definitely a little bit of hotness here. So definitely that maybe 5k elevation or 12k makes some listen a little bit hot to listen to. So the vocal for me overall in this is more of a tight vocal. It's not your lush smooth kind of vocal. So it's not the fullest vocal that I have listened to. So for me, there are other IEMs that has fuller vocal in the mix. So I would say overall, this is okay mids for me, but I would say not my favorite mids, especially for vocals. So it will depend on you if you prefer a more tight vocal. So the highs are well extended on top. Definitely that 12k gives this IEM really good musicality and some shimmer as well on top. So again, sometimes reminds me of a piezo presentation. So in this price range, maybe one of the most extended tops that I have listened to. So the guitars again are really revealing with some transient picking techniques. It shines in the mix. And for me, for percussions, it's really lively to listen to up front in the mix. So this gives a lot of air on top, which makes the listen more revealing in some instruments. And also for me on top, the tonality is still pretty good for me overall. So really good job here in the presentation as well. But if I'm gonna nitpick on top, there's still some thinness in some tracks here in the cymbals. So the cymbals are not the fullest bodied cymbals that I have listened to, but it's not that bad. It's still pretty good overall. But there are other IEMs that have fuller bodied cymbals compared to this one. So the soundstage is quite big for me in the mix, not the biggest, but I would say above average overall. So the separation is very good for a dynamic driver because of that tight presentation overall, and quite speedy presentation as well. Separation is really good for me for a dynamic driver. The imaging is really good as well in this, so one of the key strengths for me. So the imaging for me is black and white. The positioning is really pronounced in the mix. Detail wise, it's really good as well, so it's quite speedy even for a dynamic driver presentation. So overall, I really like how tight the presentation is. Still quite clean for a dynamic driver. The transients are shown in the mix as well. Very energetic listen, and also has some physicality in the overall presentation as well, being a dynamic driver, and also great tonality. So I did enjoy my listen overall. Alright, so we did compare this to other IEMs and the price range. So compared to the NFAudio Legacy 4, so the stage is smaller in the Legacy 4. The Legacy 4 has a more relaxed presentation as well overall. The vocal positioning is a touch better in the Legacy 4. It has more tamed overall presentation as well. The transients still pronounced in the Legacy 4, but not as much as your NA2. So your NA2 in comparison has a more aggressive sound, more clarity on top. The bass also, the sub bass is more impactful, has more physicality. The cymbals are also more energetic in the mix, a more revealing signature as well overall. The bass is more weighty, more deep in the mix also. So definitely the bass in the NA2 is one of the key strengths for me. So here in this comparison, so while the Legacy 4 can work for some people, for me in my personal preference, I do like the NA2 Plus more. So I like the more physicality in the sound, more pronounced bass, and also a bigger stage for me as well, and more lively to listen to, especially for some guitar tracks. So compared to the Starsea, so your Starsea has a bigger stage, a bit better micro detail. The Starsea also is lively in a different way. It's cleaner in the presentation as well. So the separation is more pronounced in the mix. I'm still in the Starsea because of the bigger stage. The vocal is a little bit more revealing as well in the Starsea in the mix. So your Starsea will have cleaner presentation overall. So the NA2 in comparison has more prominent bass slam and deeper as well. So again, something like plainer presentation to the ear. So on the ear, the bass in the NA2 is a bit tighter in the mix, and the bass has more presence in the mix for me. Brighter as well in the NA2, has more physicality in the sound with a dynamic driver presentation, a bit smoother sound as well. So your Starsea will be cleaner in presentation. So I encountered more hotness though in the NA2 over your Starsea. The vocal positioning though is more recessed in the NA2 as well. So here, it's different sounding on the ear. So the Starsea, I did like it for more vocal tracks, but I did like the NA2 Plus for some guitar tracks and also some instrumentals. And for some tracks that has ample bass, the sub bass in the NA2 is definitely warranted in the mix. So it will depend on your preference here, but the advantage in the Starsea is you still have switches. So again, toss up here, but also I did enjoy the bigger stage in the Starsea. So yeah, both of them are nice for me. It will depend on your preference here. So compared to the Starfields, so the Starfields, the vocal positioning for me is better in the Starfields. The Starfields also is more relaxed, more toned down in the mix. The bass is also more boomy in the Starfields, more mellow as well in the overall presentation. The vocals in the Starfields are fuller as well, and more mellow vocal presentation as well. So the NA2 is more lively, more physical kind of sound, tighter in presentation as well. The separation for me in the NA2 is better. The transients are more pronounced again. The vocal positioning though is more recessed and also tighter in the NA2 Plus. It's a little bit hotter as well in the NA2 Plus, so that's one downside. But yes, the NA2 Plus also still has more clarity at the top. So between these two, again, both are nice for me. Your NA2 will have more of a monitor, listen for me on the ear, more pronounced transients on top. Your Starfields will be, more smooth kind of listen. Your NA2 actually has, better technicalities for me. But yeah, the Starfields, the signature there is more IEM diffused. So again, pros and cons here, it will depend on your preference. So for me, if you're into vocals, you might like the Starfields. If you're into more instrumental tracks, world music again, you might like the NA2. So it will depend on your preference. But for me, if you're gonna ask me if I just need to choose one, it might be still the Starfields. So I do still like, the vocal presentation in the Starfields for me. So compared to the Spring 2, so the Spring 2 definitely has more micro detail. So the top in the Spring 2 is a little bit more revealing and also cleaner as well in the overall presentation. So for the vocal, I still like the vocal in the Spring 2. The bass also is more tamed in the Spring 2 as well. So the Spring 2 has, less of that, sub bass slam. I would say big difference compared to the NA2 in the bass region. The Spring 2 also is cleaner as well in the mix. So in the NA2, the bass is definitely more deep in the mix, and the sub bass is more prominent in the mix. So the imaging is more pronounced in the mix in the NA2. So it's more technically capable in that sense. The positioning in the vocal though in the NA2 is a bit recessed for me in the mix. So the positioning for me in the NA2 is similar to the Spring 2. Both have some recession in the mix. So here it will depend on your preference. Your Spring 2 will be a bit cleaner, less bass slam as well. So if you're into a cleaner kind of sound, you might like the Spring 2. If you like, more tight sub bass, better bass slam, more physicality in the sound, and more pronounced transients. Alright, so verdict for the NA2 Plus. So who is this IEM for? So first, if you like deep sub bass and also nice transients on top, and quite a bright kind of signature, this is something that fits your bill. So it has really good technicalities here. One of the best technicalities for a dynamic driver that I have tested. It has great separation for me, great imaging. That soundstage is quite big as well. Good detail for a dynamic driver. deep sub bass and quite present in the mix as well without being overpowering. It has that double horns at the top, that clarity on top. It should be ample for some tracks. It has enough air frequencies at the top. The vocal is quite revealing as well. So yeah, overall this is a very nice listen for me. So it's just maybe the hotness that I have an issue with, but overall in my listen, I did enjoy this IEM. So if you're into guitar tracks, world music, this will really shine on you. If you're into vocals though, I have other IEMs that I do recommend for that. But yeah, for those kinds of tracks, this should be in your short list. So that's my review of the NFAudio NA2 Plus. Of course, if you learned something, leave a like and subscribe for more content like this in the future. Thanks for watching, and I'm gonna see you guys in the next zpolt review. Bye bye.